First contact under fire. The emergency lights aboard Helios Station pulsed an angry red as Dr. Sarah Chen sprinted through the curved corridor of Ring 3, her medical kit bouncing against her hip. The artificial gravity fluctuated with each impact against the station's hull, making her stomach lurch. Behind her, the sound of weapons fire echoed through the metal passageways. Status report. She barked into her comm unit, ducking into an alcove as another explosion rocked the station. Multiple casualties in Diplomatic Wing B, came the breathless response from her team leader. Unknown hostiles breached the hull during the peace summit. The Vedrani delegation is cut off from their medical team. We got wounded from both species. Sarah's mind raced. The Vedrani were the first alien species humanity had encountered that showed genuine interest in peaceful cooperation. This summit was supposed to be the beginning of a new era. Instead, it was turning into a bloodbath. "I'm 3 minutes out," she replied, checking her kit's seals. The contents were proof of humanity's desperate preparation for this meeting. A combination of traditional medical supplies and experimental treatments designed specifically for Vedrani physiology, based on the limited data they'd shared. Another explosion sent her stumbling forward. Through the reinforced windows, she could see escape pods launching into space, their emergency beacons creating a dance of lights against the station's dark hull. The Diplomatic Wing's entrance was a maze of twisted metal and emergency force fields. Sarah's medical override codes got her through the security lockdown, but nothing could have prepared her for what waited inside. The grand meeting chamber, with its swooping architecture designed to accommodate both human and Vedrani delegations, had been transformed into a battlefield. Bodies, both human and alien, lay scattered across the polished floor. The air sparkled with the strange bioluminescent blood of the Vedrani, mixing with the red stains of human casualties. Sarah's training took over. She moved from victim to victim, her diagnostic scanner humming. The dead she marked with virtual tags for later recovery. The living got immediate attention, regardless of species. It was when she reached the chamber's center that she found him. The Vedrani head diplomat, Senta, lay crumpled beneath an overturned conference table. His crystalline exoskeleton, normally a brilliant azure, had dulled to a sickly gray. But it was his injuries that made Sarah pause. They were unlike anything in the briefing materials. "I need immediate assistance in the main chamber," she called into her comm. Static answered. The jammers were still active. The Vedrani's eyes, all 4 of them, focused on her with remarkable clarity despite his injuries. He spoke, his translator struggling to convert the complex harmonics of his native language. "The human healer," he managed. "They knew our biology. The weapons specifically designed." Sarah's scanner confirmed his words. The injuries weren't from conventional weapons. They were tailored to exploit weaknesses in Vedrani physiology. This wasn't a random attack. It was an assassination attempt designed to destroy any chance of peace between their species. "I can help," she said firmly, already unpacking her kit. "But some of these treatments, they're experimental, never tested on a conscious Vedrani." Senta's external membranes rippled, their equivalent of a pained laugh. "Then we both make history today, or die trying." Sarah worked with precise movements, combining her knowledge of human emergency medicine with the theoretical models of Vedrani biology. What surprised her most was how their systems shared certain fundamental patterns. Where human blood used iron to carry oxygen, Vedrani blood used copper, creating that distinctive blue luminescence. But the underlying principle was the same. As she worked, Senta spoke, his translator becoming clearer as her treatments took effect. He told her of his own people's healers, of their belief that medicine was the one true universal language. "Perhaps," he said, "that is why they targeted the medical exchange portion of our agreement first." The next hours blurred together. More casualties were brought in as security forces cleared sections of the station. Sarah found herself teaching human medical techniques to Vedrani healers even as she learned their methods. They discovered that certain human cellular regeneration treatments worked better on Vedrani tissue than their own techniques, while Vedrani biochemical stabilizers proved remarkably effective on human patients. When the all-clear finally sounded, Sarah sat back on her heels, exhausted. The chamber that had seen so much death was now a makeshift hospital. Human and Vedrani medical personnel worked side by side, their earlier diplomatic tensions forgotten in the face of shared crisis. Senta, now stable and sitting upright, gestured for her attention. "Dr. Chen," he said, his translator perfectly clear, "I believe we have found something more valuable than any peace treaty today." "What's that?" she asked, noting with satisfaction how the color had returned to his exoskeleton. "Proof," he said, "that when lives hang in the balance, our differences mean nothing. The ones who attacked us wanted to prove we were too different to coexist. Instead, they proved how similar we truly are." Sarah looked around the chamber. Human and Vedrani medical staff exchanged techniques, compared notes, worked together to save lives. In the wake of violence meant to drive them apart, they had found common ground in the most fundamental of all missions, the preservation of life. "We should formalize this," she said suddenly. "Not just the diplomatic agreements. We need a permanent medical exchange program, joint research facilities, combined emergency response teams." Senta's external membranes shifted in what she now recognized as a smile. Indeed. After all, a healer who can save two species will always be worth more than a weapon that can destroy one. As Sarah began documenting the unexpected breakthroughs they'd made, she realized that this was how real change happened. Not in grand diplomatic chambers, but in moments of crisis when people, human and alien alike, chose to reach across the divide and help each other survive. The attack meant to end relations between their species had instead forged something unprecedented. The first joint human-Vedrani medical protocol. It would serve as the foundation for everything that followed. The language of healing. 3 months after the attack on Helios Station, the Joint Medical Research Facility on Europa floated in Jupiter's shadow like a gleaming promise. Through the reinforced windows of Lab 7, Dr. Sarah Chen watched the Vedrani research vessel dock with practiced precision. Their bioships never failed to fascinate her. Vessels grown rather than built, responding to their pilots' neural signals with fluid grace. Today's arrival carried something unprecedented. The first group of Vedrani medical students approved for human medical training. The diplomatic courts had fought the decision for weeks, but the success of the emergency protocols developed during the Helios attack had finally silenced the opposition. "Incoming transmission from Senta," her AI assistant announced. The Vedrani diplomat had become the strongest advocate for the medical exchange program, though his injuries had forced him to retire from active diplomatic service. "Display," Sarah said, adjusting her lab coat. The holographic display shimmered to life, showing Senta's familiar crystalline features. "Dr. Chen," he greeted her, his translator perfectly modulated. "I trust you're prepared for today's arrivals." "As prepared as we can be," she replied, glancing at her notes. "Though I'm still concerned about the radiation protocols. Vedrani sensitivity to Europa's radiation bands means we'll need to modify our entire protection system." "That's precisely why this facility must succeed," Senta said. "Each challenge we overcome proves the value of cooperation. The extremists on both sides lose power with every shared breakthrough." Sarah nodded, but before she could respond, her emergency comm unit chimed, "Dr. Chen to Decontamination Chamber 3. Medical emergency." She was running before the announcement finished. The decontamination chambers were crucial, specially designed to accommodate both species' environmental needs during the transition from ship to station. A failure there could be catastrophic. The scene that greeted her made her heart skip. A young Vedrani medical student lay convulsing on the chamber floor, their exoskeleton flickering with distress patterns she'd learned to recognize during her crash course in Vedrani medicine. 2 human technicians stood helplessly by, their handheld scanners giving contradictory readings. "Clear the chamber," Sarah ordered, dropping beside the student. Their name tag identified them as Velren, one of the most promising candidates in the exchange program. The student's translator was offline, but Sarah had learned enough of their language to make out desperate fragments about burning and pressure. Her scanner showed something impossible. The student's cellular structure was attempting to adapt to the chamber's environment, but the process had gone into overdrive. It was as if their body was trying to evolve in real time. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. The Vedrani were known for their biological adaptability. It was what made their bioships possible. But this reaction was unprecedented. Unless access medical file Helios 147. She commanded her medical system. The file appeared. Her original notes from treating Xenta. There was a pattern here, something about how Vedrani tissue responded to human regeneration compounds. "Emergency authorization, Chen Alpha 9, she spoke clearly. "Access experimental protocol 7-3. A compartment in her medical kit opened, revealing a vial of iridescent fluid, a hybrid treatment developed from her work during the Helios crisis. It had never been officially approved, the bureaucrats deeming it too experimental. Sarah loaded the vial into an injector. "I need Vedrani confirmation," she said to her comm unit. "Priority override." Xenta's voice came through instantly. "The student's life takes priority over protocol, Doctor. Proceed." The injection seemed to shimmer as it entered Velren's system. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the convulsions ceased. The student's exoskeleton stabilized, its color returning to a healthy azure. Hours later, in the station's medical conference room, Sarah faced a joint human-Vedrani medical board. Velren, fully recovered, sat beside her. "The reaction was caused by an unexpected interaction between our standard radiation protocols and Vedrani adaptive capabilities," Sarah explained. "But more importantly, we now have proof that hybrid treatments aren't just possible. They're sometimes necessary." "What happened to me?" Velren spoke up, their translator carrying the careful precision of a scientist. "Proves that our species can do more than just work together. We can learn from each other at the most fundamental level. My body now carries a permanent adaptation developed from human medical science. I am living proof of successful integration." The board members exchanged looks. What had nearly been a diplomatic disaster had instead become another breakthrough. Sarah's unauthorized hybrid treatment would need to be properly documented and studied, but its success couldn't be denied. "There's something else," Sarah added, bringing up her latest research data. "The adaptation Velren's body accepted. It's not just protecting against radiation. It's improving their natural healing abilities in ways we never predicted, and preliminary tests suggest similar principles could be applied to enhance human medical treatments." The implications hung in the air. Every crisis, every challenge they faced, seemed to reveal new ways their species could benefit each other. The medical exchange program wasn't just about sharing knowledge anymore. It was about discovering possibilities neither species could achieve alone. As the board deliberated, Sarah received a private message from Xenta. "The attackers at Helios wanted to prove our species couldn't coexist. Instead, they started us down a path where we may become something greater together than we ever were apart." Sarah watched Velren enthusiastically explaining the sensation of the hybrid treatment to a fascinated human doctor. In that moment, she realized they weren't just building a medical program. They were laying the groundwork for a future where the line between human and Vedrani medicine, perhaps even between human and Vedrani, might blur in ways no one had ever imagined. Pandemic protocol. The quarantine alarms on Europa Station screamed to life at 300 station time. Dr. Sarah Chen was already awake, staring at test results that shouldn't have been possible. Behind her, the isolation ward's viewport showed dozens of patients, both human and Vedrani, displaying identical symptoms despite their radically different biologies. "Play the security footage again," she commanded, watching as the first case appeared in the station's civilian sector. A human maintenance worker collapsed, their skin developing a distinctive shimmer that looked disturbingly similar to Vedrani bioluminescence. Hours later, a Vedrani researcher exhibited human-like inflammation patterns that should have been physiologically impossible for their species. "Doctor." Velren's voice came through the comm. The former student, now her chief research assistant, was coordinating from the Vedrani medical ship in orbit. The latest analysis confirms it. The pathogen is artificial, a chimeric virus combining elements of both our species' biology. Sarah's hands clenched. Someone weaponized our research. The hybrid treatments we developed were stolen and perverted. Senta's voice joined the channel. Despite his retirement, the former diplomat had been called back as an emergency consultant. The same group that attacked Helios. No doubt. They've turned our breakthrough into a weapon. The irony was brutal. The virus used the same principles that had allowed their medical breakthroughs, the unexpected compatibility between human and Vedrani biology. But instead of healing, it forced devastating transformations, causing each species to develop traits of the other until their bodies failed entirely. "We've lost contact with 3 other research outposts," Station Control reported. Similar symptoms reported before communications cut. "This is spreading faster than standard quarantine protocols can contain." Sarah pulled up the virus's structure on her display. It was elegant in its horror, designed to transmit through both air and the specialized environmental systems required by Vedrani. Worse, it appeared to become more efficient with each new host, learning and adapting just as their hybrid medical treatments were meant to do. "The grace period after infection is short," Velren noted, their translator carrying undertones of stress. "Perhaps 6 hours before symptoms become severe. We're seeing an 87% mortality rate. Unless," Sarah straightened suddenly, "unless we can use the virus's own mechanics against it. It's building bridges between our biologies, trying to force changes our bodies aren't ready for. But what if we could control those changes?" She pulled up the original files from treating Velren's radiation exposure. "The adaptation your body accepted. It succeeded because it was gradual, controlled. The virus is trying to do too much too fast. If we could slow it down and give our bodies time to adapt naturally," Velren finished, their scientific excitement clear even through the translator. "But we'd need a delivery system that could work on both species simultaneously." "The environmental systems," Senta suggested, "the same ones the virus is using to spread. If we can introduce a treatment through them." Sarah was already moving, her mind racing. "We need every researcher we have, human and Vedrani. Full data sharing, no restrictions, and we need to work fast. Once symptoms progress past stage 2, the damage becomes irreversible." The next 12 hours became a blur of desperate research and trials. Teams across the station worked in sealed labs, racing against their own possible infection. Through it all, Sarah couldn't shake a haunting thought. The virus wasn't just killing people, it was attacking the very idea of cooperation between their species. In Lab 7, now converted to a primary research center, Sarah and Velren coordinated teams across multiple facilities. The solution began to take shape, a modified version of their hybrid regeneration treatment, designed to work with the virus's own adaptation mechanisms rather than against them. "It's ready for testing," Sarah announced finally, looking at the pale blue liquid in the synthesis chamber. "But we need volunteers." "The risk is necessary," Velren interrupted, their crystalline features set with determination. They pressed their environmental suit against the sample chamber's access port. "My body has already successfully integrated one hybrid treatment. I am the logical choice." Before Sarah could protest, they had already authorized the chamber's emergency protocols. The treatment entered their system through their suit's medical interface. The next few minutes were the longest of Sarah's life. She watched Velren's vitals fluctuate wildly as the treatment encountered the virus. Then, gradually, the readings began to stabilize. "It's working," Velren reported, their voice weak but clear. "The virus is being redirected. Instead of forcing chaotic changes, it's following the treatment's patterns. My body is adapting safely." "We need a human trial," Sarah said quietly, already removing her outer protection layer. "Sarah, no," Senta's voice cut in. "The risk is one I have to take," she interrupted, stepping into the chamber. "We need to prove it works on both species or it's useless. And we're out of time." The treatment felt like ice in her veins, then fire. Sarah felt her consciousness wavering as her body became a battlefield between virus and treatment. Through dimming vision, she saw her own skin begin to shimmer with Vedrani-like patterns, but unlike the other victims, the changes were controlled, purposeful. When she opened her eyes again, Velren was watching her through the chamber's viewport, their expression unreadable but their stance radiating concern. "Did it work?" she managed to ask. "See for yourself," they replied, bringing up her medical scans. The virus was still present in her system, but it had been effectively neutered, transformed into something that enhanced rather than destroyed. "The treatment doesn't just cure the virus," Velren explained, excitement overtaking concern. "It uses the virus's own adaptive properties to strengthen the body against future infections. We've created something unprecedented, a bridge between our species that works at the cellular level." Sarah stared at her hands, watching the faint luminescence pulse in time with her heartbeat. "They tried to use our differences to destroy us," she said softly. "Instead, they helped us discover just how deeply we can connect." As emergency teams began distributing the treatment throughout the station, Sarah received a message from Senta. Perhaps this was always inevitable. Not the attack, but this moment, when we finally learned that the path forward isn't about maintaining our separation, but embracing our potential to change together. The quarantine alarms finally fell silent, but Sarah knew nothing would ever be quite the same. They had done more than stop a pandemic. They had taken the first steps towards something entirely new, a future where the lines between human and Vedrani might fade away entirely. Unity through crisis. The observation deck of Europa Station offered a perfect view of the medical ships arriving from across both human and Vedrani space. Dr. Sarah Chen watched them dock, each vessel carrying patients affected by the virus, and more importantly, carrying hopes for what the treatment might mean for both species. Her reflection in the reinforced window caught her attention. The luminescent patterns flowing beneath her skin had stabilized into intricate designs that pulsed gently with her heartbeat, a visible reminder of how much had changed. Beside her, Velren's crystalline exoskeleton now showed subtle variations in texture that mimicked human dermal patterns. "The latest numbers are in," Velren reported, their translator adapting to new harmonics their partially altered vocal structures could now produce. "Over 10,000 successfully treated. No treatment rejections in the past week. The adaptive protocols are holding steady." Sarah nodded, reviewing the data on her tablet. What had started as an emergency response to a weaponized virus had become something far more profound. The treatment hadn't just saved lives. It had begun to fundamentally change those it saved, creating the first true human-Vedrani hybrids. Defense Counsel's meeting in 10 minutes, her AI assistant reminded her. "Your presence is required for the medical briefing." The council chamber was packed when they arrived. Military leaders from both species sat side by side with medical authorities and political representatives. The tension in the room was palpable, not from fear of the virus anymore, but from the implications of its cure. "Dr. Chen," the human council leader began, "your report indicates the changes from the treatment are permanent and progressive," Sarah confirmed, bringing up her latest research data. "The viral adaptation mechanism doesn't stop with survival. It continues to optimize both human and Vedrani biological systems, finding ways to combine the best aspects of both." "Meaning?" a Vedrani military commander asked, their crystalline features reflecting the room's lights. "Meaning we're seeing enhanced regeneration, Improved neural processing, stronger immune responses, Velren answered. Those who receive the treatment are becoming something new, something stronger. The chamber erupted in overlapping questions and concerns. Sarah waited for the noise to settle before continuing. We've identified the group behind the virus attack, she said, her words bringing immediate silence. They called themselves purists, a coalition of extremists from both our species. They believe that any biological exchange between humans and Vedrani would lead to the degradation of both races. Instead, Velren added, they forced us to discover our true potential for unity. The evidence was irrefutable. Security forces had tracked the purists to a hidden research facility in the Kuiper Belt. What they found there told a story of desperate fear, fear of change, fear of losing what made each species unique. The virus had been their attempt to terminate the medical exchange program permanently by showing how dangerous such cooperation could be. The question now, Sarah continued, is how we move forward. The treatment exists. It works. And those who receive it are changed forever, not just physically, but in ways we're only beginning to understand. We're seeing increased empathy, better cross-species communication, even the development of shared cultural perspectives. Are you suggesting we should deliberately spread these changes? A human representative asked, their voice sharp with concern. I'm suggesting we need to accept that they're already happening, Sarah replied. Every patient we treat becomes a bridge between our species. They can perceive and understand aspects of both human and Vedrani experience. They're not losing their original identity. They're expanding it. Sentuz's voice came through the chamber's comm system, his retirement officially ended by the crisis. Perhaps this is the ultimate test of our commitment to cooperation. Can we accept becoming something more than we are? Something that combines the strength of both our peoples. The debate raged for hours. Questions of consent, of cultural preservation, of military implications all swirled together. But as the discussion continued, Sarah noticed something remarkable. The council members were beginning to adjust their communication styles, humans adopting Vedrani gesture patterns, while Vedrani modified their speech rhythms to match human preferences. Even without the treatment, mere exposure to its effects was changing how they interacted. Look at them, Velren whispered to her. They don't even realize they're doing it. Evolution finds a way, with or without our permission. Sarah touched the luminescent patterns on her arm, feeling the gentle pulse that now seemed as natural as breathing. The purists were right about one thing. This will change everything. But change isn't the same as destruction. Sometimes it's the only way to become what we're meant to be. As the council finally moved toward a vote on how to proceed, Sarah received a private message from one of her research teams. The data made her catch her breath. What is it? Velren asked, noting her reaction. The virus. The original weapon. Sarah said slowly. We assumed it was engineered from scratch. But these genetic markers, they're ancient. The purists didn't create the compatibility between our species. They found it. Somewhere in our distant past, humans and Vedrani were connected. We're not creating something new. We're remembering something old. The implications hit her like a wave. Their transformation wasn't an aberration. It was a return to something that had been lost, a potential that had always existed in both their species' DNA, waiting to be rediscovered. As she prepared to share this revelation with the council, Sarah realized they had moved beyond questions of crisis management. They were writing the first chapter of a new history, one where humanity and the Vedrani might finally remember what they had forgotten. They had always been meant to evolve together. The real work was just beginning. A new protocol. 1 year after the virus crisis, Europa Station had been transformed. What once was a simple research facility had become the center of a new civilization, one that bridged the gap between human and Vedrani in ways no one could have predicted. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the newly constructed integration chamber, watching as another group of volunteers prepared to receive the treatment. The procedure had been refined over the past year. the harsh emergency measures of the crisis replaced by a carefully controlled process of transformation. Neural patterns stable, Velren reported from their station. Their own appearance had continued to evolve. Crystalline structures now seamlessly merged with more human-like features, creating something both alien and familiar. All candidates showing optimal compatibility markers. Sarah checked her own readings, the luminescent patterns under her skin flickering with increased activity. The ability to literally see and feel the biological processes at work, a gift of her Vedrani adaptations, still amazed her. Initiating primary sequence. The chamber hummed to life, filling with a pale blue mist that carried the refined treatment. The volunteers, 3 humans and 2 Vedrani, watched with calm anticipation. They had all chosen this, understanding what it meant. They weren't just accepting medical treatment. They were choosing to become part of humanity's next great leap forward. Dr. Chen, one of the human volunteers, called out, a young xenobiologist named Maya. We can feel it starting. Sarah nodded, remembering her own transformation. Stay calm. Let the changes flow naturally. Your bodies know what to do. Over the next few hours, she watched as the volunteers began their journey. Human-skinned, developed the first traces of bioluminescence, while Vedrani crystalline structures took on more organic patterns. But the physical changes were just the beginning. Neural synchronization beginning, Velren announced, excitement clear in their voice. Just like the ancient records predicted. The discovery in the purists' facility had led them to something extraordinary. Evidence that humans and Vedrani had once been one species, separated by millions of years of divergent evolution. The virus hadn't created something new. It had awakened dormant genetic memories, allowing both species to remember what they had forgotten. Remarkable. Senta's voice came through the observation room's comm. The former diplomat had become the head of the new Integration Council, guiding both species through this unprecedented transformation. Each group shows the same patterns, the same return to unity. Sarah monitored the neural readings with growing amazement. As the treatment progressed, the volunteers' brainwave patterns began to harmonize, showing the first signs of the enhanced empathic abilities that had become the hallmark of the transformed. It's beautiful, Maya whispered, watching her own skin begin to shimmer. I can feel them. Not just the other humans, but the Vedrani too. Their thoughts, their memories. The barriers are falling, one of the Vedrani volunteers added, their translator capturing new harmonics as their vocal structures evolved, not just between bodies, but between minds. This was what the purists had feared most, not just the physical changes, but the deep connection that came with them. The ability to truly understand another species, to share their experiences and memories as if they were your own. They had seen it as the death of their cultures. Instead, it had become the birth of something greater. Hours later, in the station's new communal garden, Sarah met with the Integration Council. The space had been designed to accommodate both original and transformed species, its environment carefully balanced between human and Vedrani needs. The latest transformation group makes 500 this month, she reported, watching the luminescent plants, a hybrid of Earth and Vedrani flora, sway in the artificial breeze. All successful. No rejections, no complications. And the children? A council member asked, one of the first to be born to transformed parents. Stable and thriving, Velren answered. They're born with the combined traits of both species, but with even greater adaptation potential. Each generation seems to unlock more of our shared genetic heritage. Sarah brought up the latest stellar maps, showing the spread of transformation centers across both human and Vedrani space. What had started as a desperate response to a terrorist attack had become a movement that neither species could have imagined. We're receiving more volunteers than we can process, she noted. Not just scientists and diplomats anymore. Artists, teachers, workers, people from all walks of life who want to be part of this change. Because they can see the truth, Senta said, his own transformed features reflecting the garden's bioluminescent light. This isn't about losing who we are. It's about remembering who we were always meant to be. Sarah touched the data crystal containing their latest research, the full mapping of the genetic path that had led their species apart, and the road that was now bringing them back together. The purists thought they were protecting their species' purity, she said. They never understood that our greatest strength lies in our ability to change, to adapt, to become more than we are. And now, Maya asked from her new position as head of xenobiology studies, where does this evolution lead us? Sarah looked out at the stars visible through the garden's dome. Somewhere out there, their original homeworld waited to be discovered. The place where humans and Vedrani had first been one species. But more importantly, somewhere out there was their future, one they would face not as separate species, but as a united people who had finally remembered their shared heritage. That's the beautiful part, she said, watching the luminescent patterns that linked all of them pulse in harmony. We get to decide that together. In the medical lab, a new group of volunteers was already preparing for transformation. Above them, more ships arrived daily, carrying those who had chosen to be part of this great change. And in the station's nursery, the first generation of naturally born hybrids was growing up, never knowing a world where humans and Vedrani were separated by anything but time and space. Barriers that, like all others between them, were finally falling away. The emergency that had forced their evolution had ended, but the story of their transformation was just beginning. And this time, they would write it together.